name's Dave Smith. I'm the lead artist on 1313.
I'm Brian Ruxenwald. I'm the lead environment artist on 1313.
Right, so first of all, obviously with Star Wars 1313, you guys have had the opportunity to really revisit something that's only been kind of skimmed over a little bit in the Star Wars trilogy. The original trilogy obviously had stuff like Jabba the Hutt's palace, and you had the Mos Eisley Cantina, and these little moments of kind of seeing just how nasty it can be if you're not kind of hanging around with a cool Jedi bunch. And you guys are really able to kind of expand on that idea and that themes. I mean, how exciting has that been?
Really exciting. I think just we haven't really seen in sort of certainly probably the last 5 years in through Clone Wars, we're not seeing what it's like to just be a regular person and be somebody who isn't kind of a demigod, in the Star Wars universe, and how that changes the relationship with the universe, and how you start to realize, well, if you can't force lightning somebody to death, like, actually this is a really scary place to be, and we're taking you to the scariest version of that, which is 1313.
That's true. I suppose even when you're like, Jedi, even when you die, you still don't really naff off. I mean, you come back as a ghost and strike someone down. I mean,
it's vulnerable here. Yeah, you feel like you like anybody can come out of any alleyway and just shoot you in the face. It is truly like a scary, scary place to be.
And I suppose that's another thing is really the environments in Star Wars have always focused on the creme de la creme. You go to you see the politicians having their amazing palaces and stuff, and apart from these moments in the cantina where you get the guys with the rubber masks playing saxophones, you don't really get a feel for what it's like for normal people to just live. And it seems like with the cityscapes you guys are working on, there is a lot more of that kind of grounded detail.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the design challenges and the design cues that we're taking is just, how did they build Star Wars up front on the budget that they had? Obviously nowadays it's a $1 billion franchise, multi-billions of dollars, but like going back to the root of like being that model maker and having George turn around to you and say, I want a cantina, or I want a speeder, or I want this, that, and the other, and like scratching your head and going, well, how actually would I go about building this on a budget? And so, although, obviously working in CG, you're not limited by the same constraints, but I think taking that approach of going back to source material, to real world elements, and going, all right, let's take that, because that's familiar to people, and give it a Star Wars flavor and give it a spin is really the kind of core of how we're approaching stuff.
Yeah, it makes things more authentic, right? It feels like you can actually go there and relate to them, but still having that Star Wars element, of course.
Yeah, because I can see a lot of real world influences. Obviously, you've got kind of everything from a bit of like LA to a lot of Hong Kong. What other kind of real world places were you really inspired by?
The big one for us, particularly as we were kind of first developing the place, was this idea of the Kowloon walled city. Just incredibly dense little slice of a metropolis where people just eke out and subsist on virtually no money, leeching off the power cables. Everything's jury rigged. It has a very kind of hand built kind of a feel to it, and there's a sense of kind of desperation. It's sweaty, it's hot, and that was just a really good touchstone for us in the early stages of designing.
And especially in the smaller details. I know it's obviously in one of these we've got a picture of what appears to be like a Millennium Falcon style ship.
There she is.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, the weird thing is you've got this this sort of underground city. So obviously 1313 is 13 floors down in Coruscant, and this or up. Sorry. Yeah. So it's pretty deep down in the. How many layers are there in total?
Well, it depends on which bit of the EU fiction you talk about.
Let's not go there then. I don't want to get you in trouble. Loads. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's lots. In the idea of the fiction though is that it's grown up gradually. So really, you guys are kind of creating something new in the fact that you're creating this part of the city that was built a long time ago. So how difficult has it been to kind of retrospectively kind of work out what that might have been like?
It's a couple of challenges there. I think the temptation out of the gate is to go, well, the surface of Coruscant looks like the 1930s and the 1940s. Like, how do we go backwards from there? But I think, in actual fact, you can't be too literal in terms of trying to replicate the way that architecture for the real world kind of developed. So you're just looking to take some of those cues. It is really old, but people live down here, and people have been building here ever since. So there's always going to be the fancy place up top, but it's not just going to be completely different down here. It's going to be the guy who bought the IKEA version of the furniture from up there. So it looks maybe in a similar design aesthetic, but it's cheap, it's nasty, it's broken down, and so we do connect the two spaces with a little bit of visual language, but we want this place to feel much more stark and hard and angular than the surface.
Yes, it feels familiar, but again, yeah, it has that much more built-on look. Things are like jerry-rigged, even the buildings. So you get that sense of things are always falling apart. Things are constructed. It's a kind of a living city.
Yeah, nothing down here is really fulfilling its original purpose. It's being reused, it might be. And we look to, a lot of the European cities for that kind of stuff, where you may have, like even places like London, where you've got, a bank that was in this beautiful old building now, or, a church is now a bar, and so it's that kind of repurposing of the city that we're kind of interested in as well.
So maybe we're going to see a lot of recognisable Star Wars stuff, but maybe in a kind of a state that we're not used to. I spotted what looked to be a C-3PO, which was kind of being used as a burnt out bin.
Oh, the R2 unit. Yeah, he's right.
I'm going to get in so much trouble for that. It's jet lag, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. No, so get out. Yeah, but that I mean, one of our concept artists came out with that idea, a long while back, and everybody was just like, dude, that's the coolest, and we're looking for those kind of opportunities. We're looking for those nods to the fans. That the city's just so rich and ready for us to Easter eggs here and there,
charm.
and just
It's so much charm, little nuggets of stuff we love from the movies, and it's a great opportunity to do it wherever we can.
And how easy is it to? I mean, it must be a temptation sometimes when you're creating these new environments, but also trying to kind of keystones of Star Wars, just to kind of chuck stuff like that in there all the time and go, let's put in this. Is it a struggle to kind of be kind of more intelligent about having the tiny details making the place feel like the universe, rather than just going, let's just whack a speeder bike in there?
It depends. I mean, it just depends. If you're working in an area of the city that's really far away from what people recognize, then I think you give the license to be a bit more heavy-handed with it. And we never ever want a player to feel that something is so unfamiliar to them that they're having to think about it being Star Wars. We're always trying to reinforce that.
That's the service of the design too, the game design. So if you want to have the player look a certain way, you have to have the most appropriate set dressing or those little details that make sense to what the game design wants.
And it's very different in the fact that the classic Star Wars has always been huge shiny vistas, very kind of like broad strokes, perfectly, especially the episode kind of 1, 2 and 3 stuff, very kind of shiny, perfect. Mm-hmm. You guys are doing something just totally different really. It's compressed, dirty, tight. Mm-hmm. I mean, that must be quite a challenge to still retain that kind of same scale and size and sense of it.
Yeah, I think it ties into really a lot of like the themes of the game, going back to the idea that the Star Wars movie is about basically control of the entire galaxy, and the themes are enormous and the stakes are enormous. But, the heroes are elevated and powerful enough to deal with those stakes. I think down here it's a much more kind of personal, kind of human scale set of events. And so, of course, then it's the player against the city, if you like, and the city itself is,
it's oppressive, right? You have these buildings kind of creeping down at you, but it does feel like you're always under this pressure.
Yeah. And what sort of different areas have we got in the city? Because obviously you say it's all on this one layer. Yeah. Can you give us some examples of the sort of the different areas of the city we might be visiting?
Well, without being too specific on this front, but there's heavy industry. There's places where people live. There's
variety.
There's a lot of variety of stuff there. Yeah, I mean, there's more of a kind of a slummy, rundown kind of area. Anything that you'd expect to see in a real world city, you'd find an analog for down here, just compressed into a much kind of a more dense setup.
And obviously, it's finally. I mean, you're going to see a lot of nasty types down here. It is where the criminal underworld kind of resides. Yeah. Are we going to see like a real mixture of the races? Are we going to see like pretty much a lot of the races we've seen in Star Wars, kind of a nastier side of all of those?
Absolutely. You'll see not only nastier versions of things, but more out of shape versions of things. Like everybody in the Star Wars movies, it seems like they work out all the time. And you want that feeling of there's fat Quarrens down here, or there's like people missing limbs who actually can't afford to get like nice droid parts.
Fat Wookiees.
Wookiees are pretty strong. They're kind of hard to fatten up, but I mean, the danger is then that this is just a giant Ewok, and you don't want that.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Are we going to see gangster Ewoks?
Probably not.
Well, when is this?
Nothing's out of the question, but I haven't seen one yet.
I just think gangster Ewok, writes itself. You can have that for free. You can have that.
Take that.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much for your time.
You got it.